All right, sports fans, it's time to talk tackle. So we're finishing up our second, complete season out on the Chesapeake Bay. Specifically, we're talking about Kent Island and those areas. Everywhere from down where the chop tank, is at the bottom there, where it empties out in the bay, all the way up to the Chester River, and beyond the Chester River up to the shoals. The Belvedere Shoals. So all around Kent Island, including all the rivers, like the Miles River and the Wye River and the Chester River, down to the bottom of the Eastern Bay as it feeds out into the mouth, Poplar Island. Those are the areas that I fish, specifically on the eastern shore side. Now, I have thrown every conceivable lure you could possibly imagine at the striped bass and anything else that's out there. So I've caught bluefish, I've caught striped bass, I've caught Spanish mackerel, and tons of perch, and tons of striped bass for that matter. And at the end of 2 seasons, what I'd like to talk about is what works. So I've also gone through a lot of tackle. I have broken tackle, lost tackle, bought tons of tackle, but I have a setup that I like to use now that is conducive to fishing all sorts of conditions, with the exception of, say, trolling from the boat. So trolling, that's a different story altogether. We could do something about that separately. And specifically trolling, I'm only trolling usually in the spring, specifically when the rockfish, or should say the striped bass, are moving up, the breeders are in, and we were successful this year. But for most of the other types of fishing, I don't like to troll. To me, it's just too boring. There are a lot of people that would disagree with me on that, but I prefer sight fishing and then looking for structure that's perpendicular to the flow of the water, depending upon the tide, whether it be incoming or outgoing. I fish all weather, all temperatures. The only thing that I avoid is high wind, and that's because I have a small boat and it's kind of miserable fishing in high wind. So in terms of the gear, I've gone from really heavy duty stuff, really heavy duty trolling stuff, and moved into extremely lightweight stuff to be more sporting. But the thing that I find the most effective is this setup right here. This is the St. Croix, it's the Power Spin series, and it's a 6.5 foot, and it's medium light. So I feel like I can throw just about everything I need to. And throwing from the boat, if you got to get some distance and you're throwing metals and you're throwing heavier swim baits, this works absolutely fine. So I've caught everything from hefty 30+ inch fish all the way down to the little bitty schoolies on this thing. It handles everything out there. I have no doubt that I could probably handle, a breeder with this if you played it right. I string it up. My main line is a 15-pound Power Pro braid. I use 15-pound. And the reason I use the 15-pound on the Super Slick is because I can get really good distance out of the casting, which is important, and especially when you have even light winds on a boat, it's just always more tumultuous out there with the air. I use that, and I like the high vis because as I get a little older, I don't see as well, and this helps me identify the line and where it is in the water. And I use 25-pound fluorocarbon leader. This is good enough to get me to dislodge stuff from oyster bars and things like that, and even some of the wrecks that are out there when you're fishing structure. And that's always a plan B when I'm going down to the bottom. I'm trying to catch something to salvage the day. And it often works, but I've lost a lot of gear, and this works the best. This will get me 85 to 90% of what I'm fishing for in that area. And I fish the brackish water only. I really haven't done any freshwater fishing. I don't focus on it. But everything from a substantial sized keeper striped bass all the way down to tiny perch you've seen me catch many times. So 6.5 foot rod, medium light action, and that's good for the boat. Anything larger than that on the boat can become a little difficult when you're trying to, move the lure along the surface perhaps. And then on the reel, I use, first of all, St. Croix is my gear for the rods, and for the reels, I always use Shimano, and this is a Stratic 2500. Has enough line in it because stripers they won't spool you, and you really want to get them in as quick as you can, because especially in the warmer weather, they tire out fast, and you want to get them in as quick as you can and release that fish unharmed. So I can crank this drag down pretty tight after they strike and pull in a substantial size fish and let him go pretty quickly. It's got enough backbone to it, but especially when you're fishing for small stuff, a 1000 series reel is too small. The line will have too much memory and too much twist in it. So I like the 2500 series Shimano Stratic, paired up with that 15-pound braided slick braid, 15-pound high vis, and then the 25-pound fluorocarbon. So we'll talk about knots and stuff like that later, but let's get into some of the gear and what works. So first of all, everything you could possibly imagine. I've loaded up so many things over the years, these years, but I will tell you what works the best. So let's go to the whiteboard here. So what we have here is the remains of 2 Hogy Slowtails. And that came specifically at the hands of these nasty little bluefish that love to come up and just whack that tail up. Now let me show you what this looks like when it's not destroyed. I always use these waterproof cases, these Plano waterproof cases in the boat. If I leave it on the boat, the stuff inside doesn't get moldy. So the Slowtail comes in 3 sizes, and that's new this year. Let me get some of these out so I can show you what we've got. All right. Well, the old adage in fishing on the Chesapeake Bay is, if it ain't white, it ain't right, and if it ain't chartreuse, it ain't no use. But I would tell you it's not necessarily true. So this is what happens when the bluefish get hold of it, and sometimes when you've got a sizable striper, we'll bite that tail off, and this is what it looks like when it's in one piece. The hooks are fantastic. They're nice and sharp. I think they use these barbarian hooks, Hogy does. And why I like them like this instead of, you know, buying a jig head and then rigging it up myself is mainly because how quickly I can change them out. Because when the stripers are hot and they're on the top, you don't have that much time. You got to get on it because it can dissipate very quickly, especially when you get guys crashing through the bait. And they come in several colors, but the colors that I think 4 colors, maybe 5, but there's the white, which certainly will work in a lot of different varieties. The chartreuse, this has worked on bright sunny days when I needed to throw something different at them and got their attention, specifically around the bridge pilings, the Bay Bridge. But the 2 that work the best are the black and the natural olive. They imitate the forage out there better. And I will tell you that the big fish will go for a small profile more than they'll go for the big profile. So this is the 3/4 ounce, I think it's 3.5 inch. And then you've got the, I believe it's a 1 ounce and it's like 4 1/4. And then you've got the 5.5 inch. And I've had a little schoolie whack on these guys right here, but by far and away, I mean, by hands down, this smaller profile hits them. And of the 2, it's the olive. And as you can tell, these 2 guys, I mean, they're pretty beat up, missing eyes, just chewed to heck. So this guy works fantastic. And I mean, I've thrown their pro tails, I've thrown the slow tails, I've thrown the epoxy jigs, I've thrown everything at them. These things work like magic. Now, I also started out, you know, as a desperate, you know, newbie to the Chesapeake Bay, throwing Berkeley Gulp at them, specifically the white with a jig head on it. And I would tell you that it is the action of the Berkeley Gulp tail that is the thing that gets them to bite. Because the stench of that stuff, as it gets all over the boat, it's a little bit difficult to deal with, but that shouldn't be, you know, an impediment to it. And if you're out there to fish, sometimes things get stinky, right? Including you. But if I throw this and I throw a Berkeley Gulp, they will hit this as much, maybe even more. And I think it's because of the action of this tail versus the Berkeley Gulp tail. So the smell had no effect. In 2 years of fishing through thick and thin seasons, hot and cold weather, you know, trophy season, all of it. These tails work. The Slowtail by Hogy is absolutely fantastic. They are not cheap, but the quickness of being able to tie a loop knot on here and get fishing again is fantastic. It makes it easy. And I take usually about 6 of these with me, these outfits with the St. Croix and the Shimano Stratix. So these are number one. Absolutely number one. Sight casting, surface blitzing. I've bounced it off the bottom. I've, you know, quick, slow, quick, slow, slow, fast. Every conceivable retrieve, they hit it like crazy. The second thing that really works is when you're fishing on the bottom. I don't have it here with me, but I would tell you that a sabiki rig, specifically with the chartreuse little pieces of flashabou on there, the 2 top hooks are the chartreuse, and then instead of putting a weight on, I put a Hogy peanut bunker jig on the bottom, and I change out the treble to a single. It's just easier to release the fish with these. It's a little bit of work for you as a fisherman, but hey, you know, we want to save the species. So change them out to the single hooks. You'll miss a few, but the big ones you will not. And some of the treble hooks, they're smaller individual hooks, and they'll bend over time. But this thing kind of bounced off the bottom. This will imitate a bunker. This will imitate, you know, whatever forage is coming out. But big ones, I've caught big fish on this bottom one, and the schoolies will grab the 2 upper hooks. So if you're fishing, if you're watching your depth finder and you see that they're moving down, they will definitely hit on this. And I've pulled many double bubbles out, as you've seen, using this rig. They'll hit this, they'll hit the sabiki hooks, and they hit these guys like crazy. The Hogy Slowtails and the Hogy Peanut Jig on the bottom of a sabiki rig. And I mean, every single thing that's out there in that bay will hit on these things. So that's my gear review after 2 years of fishing there, and even in the toughest conditions, this stuff will work. So my advice to you as newbies, and if you don't want to use bait fishermen will always outfish an artificial guy every single time, but I'm just not doing it. I want to be more sporting about it, and I'm getting rid of the Berkeley Gulp. It's just not as effective as these Slowtails. So medium light, St. Croix rod, Stratix Shimano 2500 series, spun with 15-pound Power Pro braid, slick, high vis, 25-pound fluorocarbon leader, and then tie on a loop knot for your Slowtails, and then also rig up a rod with a sabiki with a Hogy Peanut Jig on the bottom with a single hook on it. And I will tell you, in every single condition, you will bring up fish when other boats are not. And I'm even including occasionally live liners. I fished around the bridge piling several times this year, and I was beating guys that I was pulling fish into the boat and they were live lining. There's just something about that tail. There's something about the way they look. They work, sports fans. What works? This works. Take my advice, try this stuff out. Captain T out for now.